edition of the NPH Hour on News Talk Saga 960 AM. My name is Jason Thom, and I will be with you for the next hour for a show that not only speaks directly to the Canadian basketball community, but also the general public. Well, I hope we'll hear the stories on this show and look to support the people on it and better understand why the sport of basketball is something that so many people are so passionate about here in Canada. We're less than a week away from the return of professional basketball to Canada. With no Raptors and no Raptors 905 north of the border, it has been 9 months since the Canadian Elite Basketball League wrapped up its summer series, and next week, the league will begin a season that will last about 6 weeks, with games happening in British Columbia, Alberta, Saskatchewan, and 4 cities in Ontario. Last week, I had the commissioner of the CEBL, former CFLer Mike Morreale, on the program to talk about the challenges in getting the league off the ground 3 years ago, the challenges of playing during a pandemic, and the challenges that basketball faces just on a day-to-day basis in this country. And it's so important for this league to come back to be able to show that the sport can be played safely at all levels. On today's show, I have 2 Canadians that are currently getting ready for the upcoming CEBL season. Also on the show, someone who has one of the most interesting stories in Canadian basketball history. Braden Anderson, who went from homelessness in Alberta to becoming the first male Division I basketball player to become a lawyer while playing the game at the collegiate level. And now he is here to help the next generation understand how to maximize their opportunities at the post-secondary level through the game of basketball. Interestingly enough, our first guest also has a message he wants to share after transitioning from student athlete to professional athlete. And it's a message about playing your role to perfection while seeking out knowledge that will help you through every facet of your life well after the basketball stops bouncing. Amidou Bamba of the Guelph Nighthawks of the Canadian Elite Basketball League. Amidou, you've played a professional season in Spain, and after being a student athlete for so long, how has the transition been like to a professional basketball player? Was there challenges that you faced that maybe you didn't expect? Because I just keep hearing that everything is so aligned when you're a student athlete and your time is all like broken up properly. Was it a weird transition for you?
I would definitely say that was one of the big things, what you just mentioned, how everything was laid out for you. I think that was the biggest jump from going from a student athlete to professional. You know, when you think of the professional level, you think that, okay, now I don't have to do any schoolwork to go along with those athletics. But what you don't realize is that you completely lose all structure that was handed to you. You know, in college, you know, you had everything laid out. You had weights at this time, you had this at this time. And at the professional level, you do have that, but then what are you going to do in all that free time that you now have? Are you going to, you know, waste your time doing nothing? There's no one, you know, goading you to go to the gym. No one's telling you to do anything outside of the mandatory things that are set out for you. And I think that's the biggest difference. It teaches you a lot that, like, you need a high level of discipline in order to play at the professional level, because if not, you may end up falling behind, because now you're thinking, okay, I just have to go to this and this today. And now you're not thinking about, how am I going to improve in the day? How am I going to, you know, manage my time? So I think that that's one of the biggest things. I think there's a certain safety net that comes with being a student athlete that not a lot of people think about. Whereas at the professional level, there is no safety net. And if you fall, you will fall hard.
It's a great perspective. And you know, the next question I had for you was about the CEBL, because now this is your first year in the CEBL. And this is something that when you started in the NCAA, it didn't exist. So, you know, how good of an opportunity is this, especially at this point in your career and before, you know, the European season would be starting?
Yeah, this is a tremendous opportunity. As you can see, the CEBL is growing at such a rapid pace. There's such a high level of competition in the league. You've got, you know, former draft picks. You've got G League players. You've got so many high level players. You've got great Canadian athletes in there. You've got great American athletes in there. It's becoming, now it's not so much of a Canadian league is starting to become more and more of an international league. It's starting to creep to that international recognition. It's obviously a slow and sure process. You can't necessarily rush anything, but you can see the growth. And I'm really excited to be a part of that, because now I have the opportunity in the summer to play against such high level competition. And it sets me up for my next professional season. It gives me a stepping stone. It also helps me, it gives me a gauge of where I am as a professional athlete. It gives me another sense of where I'm at, what I need to improve on. I have another set of eyes looking at me. I have more film to work with. There's so many different opportunities for me to develop my game in such a positive way against such great athletes. And I'm really excited about being a part of that.
4 years ago, you were a part of something else that was pretty special. And I've had a couple of players from that U19 World Cup gold medal squad on this program. Looking back on that team, I remember Coach Roy Rana gave all the players cards for the role that they had to play. And I think that was the most special thing about that team, was everybody played their role to perfection. What did your card say? Do you remember?
The card that he gave me was the Beast. And basically what that entailed was, I play this sort of, I guess, intense role. I basically, rebound everything, be an interior presence, make your presence be known on the court at all times. I think that worked really well for me, because honestly, I came in a little confused about what I should do on this team. And up until that point, and still past that point, 4 years later, I had never received anything like that from any coach. So that was very special to me. And it at that moment, it became crystal clear what my role was on that team. And I think it helped me tremendously. It helped me leaps and bounds while playing on that team. And even moving forward, just sort of having that idea of, this is who I am. Let's make something out of this.
In your Instagram, you have, your Canada basketball jersey underneath your robe when you graduated at Coastal Carolina, and you get your degree there. You're on the president's list, male student athlete of the year for excelling both academically and athletically. How did all of that and your focus on academics shape your transfer as a grad transfer to where you went next? And I guess more or less, because that grad year is a free year to an extent, most people focus on basketball, but at the same time, it sets yourself up for life after basketball, doesn't it?
There are a lot of factors that went into why I transferred to Charlotte, but, talking from an academic standpoint and a professional life outside of basketball standpoint, a big reason why I graduated from Coastal Carolina as a finance major. And I wanted to go somewhere where, after I was done playing basketball, I would be in a city that had a financial focus that I could, advance in terms of financial opportunities, opportunities in the financial services industry. And Charlotte is one of the fastest growing cities in the country from a financial standpoint. Obviously, New York City is the massive hub for finance. Obviously, you have Wall Street and everything, but Charlotte is underlooked in that sense, and it's growing so rapidly, especially from a financial standpoint, that being in Charlotte was a great opportunity for me after basketball.
So you were a financial major, and I have to ask the question, up until that point, or at any point, was financial literacy something that was ever taught to you as a young man coming up through the world of basketball?
There wasn't much of an emphasis in really most of the years that I had been playing basketball. I remember we sort of had life courses at UNC Charlotte, where we learned different life skills along those lines. But even before that, I had never received any sort of training, I guess, or anything like that about financial literacy. It's something that's extremely underlooked, and I did have to work hard to seek that out, even outside of my finance classes, because there are certain things that you don't learn from those finance classes. a lot of the stuff that I learned in those classes had nothing to do with personal finance. And it's such an important aspect. I'm actually working with this man. He's the founder and CEO of this asset management company in North Carolina. And me and him and I are working on bringing financial literacy to college student athletes. It's something that we had been talking about for about a year now. And it's something that I'm really excited about because I understand the importance of financial literacy. I've played with so many different players from so many different backgrounds. And I've played with guys who are currently making a lot of money doing it. And, it's so important that student athletes, whether they go on to play basketball at the next level or do they decide to start working full time in a career in whatever industry, it's so important to understand how to both use your money in a way that works for you and to make sure that the money isn't using you at the same time. It's so easy to get caught up when you get your first paycheck after being a student athlete. It's so easy to just start spending. Mm-hmm. And I think it's so important.
The last thing I wanted to pass on, because I know you're somebody about playing your role, do you think it's lost on some of these young guys that it's okay to not be the guy on the team and just being a guy on a winning team and then learning all these things that come with it so that when you get to your next level or your next stop, that you have a better chance of being the guy? And if you maybe aren't ever that person, there's still lots of things that can enrich your life beyond that kind of shine that comes with it.
I think there's a sort of stigma around young people and being a role player, because role in their mind doesn't imply being a star player. And I think that there's a need to get rid of the stigma around that, because like you said, there are so many opportunities to use those skills that you've learned as a role player, and they carry on so much further than where you might be right now. And it's sort of having that ability to look at the long game, whether it's in basketball or out of basketball. I will say that, there are so many things that you learn from playing basketball that have nothing to do with how many points you score. Say, for example, the time management, working with teammates and developing in that way. The competitive drive that comes with, being an athlete and wanting to be successful. And none of that has to do with scoring points per se. It has to do with these sort of intangibles that you gain from the sport, and that will carry you so much further than scoring 30 points will. Where you are right now is not all that you will be. So make sure that you do what you do really well, rather than try to do everything at a sort of, average level. Like when you have that role, make sure you play that role at a very high level. Try to achieve perfection in that role, because in some way or another, that's going to benefit you greatly in the future. Maybe in ways that you won't be able to see right now, but it will become very, very, very important for you long term. And even short term, you're looking at just the season in general. You're playing this role at an extremely high level. And if everyone on the team is doing that, you're going to be a winner. And look, hoisting a championship feels better than scoring points a game will. And I know that from firsthand experience. I have the ring to prove it. And it feels so much better when you can say, yeah, I won the whole thing. No one's really going to be saying, okay, but how many points did you have? They're going to be saying, oh yeah, you won the whole thing.
That's why we have this show, and that's why I'm glad I had you on it. And I'm glad that now when you take the floor with the Nighthawks this year, the CEBL, people are going to know a little bit more about you. Amidou Bamba, world champion, and now playing his first year in the CEBL. Welcome back home, man. I'm looking forward to calling your games this year.
Yeah, I appreciate it, and thank you for having me on. I had a great time.
Through the first few months of inviting guests onto this show, one theme has stuck out, Every Canadian that has walked their path in this basketball world want to turn around to help those that are walking it behind them. And my next guest should have the ear of every young man or woman who is looking to play the sport at the post-secondary level, because he wants each and every one of them to maximize on the opportunity they have by making decisions that will benefit them for the rest of their lives. Braden Anderson, a former Division I student athlete who returned to the court from a life-altering car accident to become a New York City lawyer. He is next on the NPH Hour here on News Talk Saga 960 AM.